Welcome back to the Daily Dope Show, where all of a sudden I should be able to make more videos because I just have a way quicker way to do it. Pretty much be making these videos while I read the story the first time after I get this figured out. So I've been keeping up with this opioid commission that Christie was put in charge of earlier this year by the new president, Mr. Trump. And just like any time a Republican is in office and there's some kind of a drug epidemic, they want to fucking go full guns blazing, drug war style on this shit. How do I know? Because they just do. All right. They basically hired the military to fucking advise them on how to handle the opioid crisis. And when it comes to, solutions as to things that you can do to try to help get us out of this crisis, or at least ease the pain a little bit, a lot of people are talking about marijuana. In fact, there was over 10,000, and I think the new number is over 12,000 comments submitted to these guys about this fucking thing, about cannabis being a way out or a way in without having to get opioids in the first place. They always say, oh, marijuana is a gateway drug to leads to harder things. And whenever you say that, don't fucking fool us. What you really are trying to scare people with is, ooh, it's going to lead you to harder things, as in heroin, and you're going to shoot heroin in your veins and prostitute yourself to afford your drugs and eventually kill yourself with that shit. Marijuana, as it turns out, is the gateway to a better life where you never even go down that road and you don't end up at heroin. So, what they're really talking about is somebody that would have done heroin anyway, just somewhere along the way smoked some weed too. Because, well, why wouldn't they? How couldn't they? The fucking weed is pretty much the most common thing besides coffee and beer, So of course, somebody that's on the path to doing heroin, which is pretty much like they think about it before they ever actually see it in person, and then as soon as they find it, they do it. They don't take no gateway to do that. That's just somebody that wants to do fucking heroin. You should find out how to educate people before they get to the decision in life when they think, oh, I think I want to do heroin, or I want to do these opiate pills. But no matter who you are and how loud you say that marijuana can help in this situation that we're in, and one of the big things I hear, the opioid commission and, attorney generals and governors in states like Ohio and Kentucky and shit, where the opioid crisis is just beating the fuck out of them. One thing I keep hearing them say is, man, I sure wish there was a safe alternative pain medication that we could get people so that the doctors had options to prescribe people, especially people with chronic pain. I wish there was something like that, something that didn't have a horrible addiction behind it and a horrible death rate of overdosing circling it. What would that be? According to a vast majority of those 12,000 comments that were sent to the commission that they ignored, Christie just totally ignored that shit. Well, they were saying the exact thing I just illustrated, that cannabis is that fucking drug that you're looking for, that's better for chronic pain than opiates. It's not as addictive. It's not addictive at all for most people. If you don't have an addictive built-in predisposition, then, you can probably quit it just as easy as not eating fucking bagels anymore. So let's check this out. And this is by Tom Angel. And if you're somebody I read recently and I didn't give you credit for it, I'm sorry. Don't flame me up for it. I try to give everybody credit where credit's due. So, and again, big props to Tom Angel for Marijuana Moment, new website that's just overwhelming me with awesome stories daily by especially Tom Angel. You are a busy guy. So anyway, oh shit. I didn't even know that was a thing. Let's like that. Go on over to Facebook and go ahead and like that if you have Facebook. I'm starting to want to get out of Facebook, but it's kind of like, it's hard to break that addiction. Speaking of addictions. So speaking of addictions, let's see what they figured out over at the Opiate Crisis Management Commission. And remember, they had a deadline, and I think they missed the deadline, but they did put out their final words on Wednesday. So New Jersey Governor Christie thinks today's expansion of medical marijuana laws will cause problems similar to the rise in opiate prescribing over the past 2 decades. Oh, really? And that is because marijuana kills people like opiates? Why would that be, Chris? There's a lack of sophisticated outcome data on dose, potency, and abuse potential for marijuana. That don't mean you don't have common sense and can just open your eyes and look around and say, hey, you know what? It looks like the dose is whatever you need. You can't possibly do too much of it. And if you do, you might accidentally fall asleep for a minute. Potency. There's plenty of fucking sophisticated data on potency. It's called, when you have a regulated system, the potency is written right on the package that your marijuana's in, dumbass. And abuse potential. Abuse potential for marijuana. What do you know about abuse potential, Christie? I mean, you're somebody that abuses food, all right? And I'm not here to make fun of that. That's a pretty serious thing. But when you talk about abusing things, marijuana is not dangerous, first of all. Second of all, how do you abuse something that can't really hurt you? I mean, sure, you can smoke too much of it and end up playing video games for too long and piss off your parents, maybe, in the basement. But that's a whole nother video clip, all right? We're trying to break those stereotypes. But when it comes to abuse potential for marijuana, there really isn't a whole lot. I mean, you got your bongs and your dabs and shit like that, which I see people do. And then, you know, right after about 10 seconds after they take the initial hit, maybe a half a minute to a minute later, they're right back to normal, like nothing ever happened. You know, I mean, you act like when you abuse marijuana, it's just going to fucking lay you out flat like heroin or make you drunk or something. So I don't understand that shit, how you can make statements like this when these are just common sense things. Like I was bitching at the FDA earlier about how, you know, they're saying that people can't make certain claims when the actual U.S. government has made these claims. So this is a letter he wrote to Trump on Wednesday, the final letter of the commission. This mirrors the lack of data in the 90s and early 2000s when the opioid prescribing multiplied across healthcare settings and led to the current epidemic of abuse, misuse, and addiction. That's fucking false too, dude. We didn't need any data in the 90s and early 2000s on this opioid prescribing. Opioids have been prescribed for hundreds of years. We got plenty of fucking data on all the opioid prescribing you want to know about. All right? We know how addictive it is. We know how bad people misuse it. We know how easy it is to abuse. We know all these things because everybody in this fucking country, and probably everybody in most of the fucking world, knows somebody who has been addicted to fucking opiates. And it's not pretty. It's really not pretty. We know the pain and the anguish that they go through. We know what addiction looks like because of these opioids. And you're full of shit, man. 2 sentences in a row, flat out just full of shit. I can't really call them lies because they sound more like legal statements than anything else, like he had the lawyers rake this shit over. Christie's chair of the President's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis, which has been tasked with generating recommendation to reduce overdoses. Quote, the Commission urges that the same mistake is not made with the uninformed rush to put another drug legally on the market in the midst of an overdose epidemic, Christie wrote. All right, here's the problem I have with that. And you know you're fucking flat out just full of shit, Christie. But he calls fucking marijuana tax revenue, he calls that blood money. Even though there's opioid manufacturers in his state that donate to his campaigns that basically, you know, are peddling death. And meanwhile, he has rehab clinics because, you know, you need rehab for marijuana. I mean, this guy is sick. It's like he's got some vendetta against marijuana or something. It's weird. But anyway, what he's trying to say is we don't need another drug out there that's legal in the midst of this overdose epidemic. You're acting like fucking marijuana is something you could overdose on again. And you know that's not, you know that's a disingenuous pack of lies that you have to basically throw out with that to make that seem like you can equate shit like that. And by the way, what do you want it to be, illegal? I mean, why should it be illegal? You have legal pain killers like opioids, the pills that everybody's addicted to. Those are legal. Most of the people that are addicted to those got there through legal channels. They have a doctor. The insurance company pays for their fucking scripts. Are you fucking paying attention here, dude? So you're going to make them go to the illegal market to get marijuana if they so feel that they need that to help them get out of their addiction. In the letter, the New Jersey Republican ignored a growing body of research indicating that marijuana policy changes are associated with reduced opioid issues, instead singling out one study appearing to suggest the opposite. Quote, the commission acknowledges that there is an active movement to promote the use of marijuana as an alternative medication for chronic pain and a treatment for opioid addiction. And let us not forget the 12,000+ fucking comments that you ignored, but maybe that's what he's talking about here, because that was fronted by Normal. And whenever that happens, they kind of listen to it because Normal's been around a while. They know people that they know. Recent research out of the National Institute of Health's National Institute on Drug Abuse found that marijuana use led to 2.5 times greater chance that the marijuana user would become an opioid user and abuser. The commission found this very disturbing. Rewind that, what? Marijuana use led to a 2.5 times greater chance that the marijuana user would become an opioid user and abuser. What does that even mean? So if you use marijuana, there's a 2.5 times greater chance that you would become an opioid user or abuser. You got to understand how they do. That's like a algebra question, kind of like a math problem that's written out in words a little bit, right? You have a 2.5 times greater chance that you will become an opioid user or abuser if you use marijuana, as opposed to somebody who don't. That's the Y here. X is the marijuana user. Y would be somebody that don't use marijuana. So the guy that don't use marijuana versus the guy that uses marijuana. What you're saying is that almost, so 2.5 times. This is really blowing my mind how they fucking worded this to make it sound like it's some kind of a big deal, but it ain't. This really comes from opioid users who said they use marijuana once again. That's where that comes from, clearly. And again, this is the National Institute on Drug Abuse sitting around with a shitload of data here's your hypothesis, here's your like conclusive statement. Now get in that data and fucking figure out how that can be about. There's no other way you come to this conclusion. Because 90% or more, I'm just going to say 95% or more of marijuana users never go on to use harder drugs and definitely never become opiate abusers. So fuck you, Christie, with your disingenuous bullshit. You just want to ignore all the other things that are out there that actually say that marijuana is better to prescribe than for pain. How many doctors have came through and said that? I'm going to keep going back to California. 90% of the people that get medical marijuana in California for chronic pain said that it works, and 6 out of 9 people, when asked, what would you rather get prescribed for chronic pain, cannabis over opioids? That's 6 out of 9 there. These are California studies. The vast majority of public comments sent to the commission concern legal marijuana access's role in opioid addiction and overdose rates. But except for the one paragraph in Christie's letter to Trump, that the panel ignored the issue. It's ridiculous. The commission held its final... I mean, this is a crisis. This is like all the times you hear them talking about, oh, the doctors that are like talking about, or the kids' parents. Oh, we exhausted all the other possibilities and we tried all the other drugs and remedies that doctors talked about before we finally decided that, okay, I guess we're going to have no choice but to try marijuana. It's like, are you fucking kidding? Did you read that marijuana can't kill you? Marijuana is safe. Marijuana is really good for you, essentially. There's absolutely nothing bad or harmful about it. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. The commission held its final meeting on Wednesday and issued a report suggesting the expansion of drug courts and a large-scale anti-drug advertising campaign, among other moves. Remember the clip I did about this before when they were asking Tom Price about this shit? And he's like, oh, yeah, we're going to make a vaccine for addiction. I think that's one of the other things that they're talking about. But here we go again. Expansion of drug courts and large-scale anti-drug advertising campaign. This is fucking the war on crack 2.0. You know what I mean? The only difference between this and the war on crack back in the 80s is, oh yeah, this time it's your white kids that they're going after. And believe me, the jails are going to fill up fast as fuck if they do start going after white kids. Because this is a problem that crosses all stereotypical, whatever you want to call the demographics. This is every neighborhood. This is every town. This is everywhere. All right? This shit isn't going away. Not with this fucking commission on it. Not with them talking shit about marijuana like they are. Apply the lessons learned to current movements to medicalize and legalize other Schedule I drugs, the report says, in a clear allusion to marijuana. I mean, what other thing would you be talking about? Everything else that's Schedule I right now is either, being looked at as moved to Schedule II or wondered why it's on the schedule. I mean, what are you talking about, man? Marijuana there shouldn't even be a fucking CSA. The catalyst of the opioid crisis was a denial of its addictive potential. I don't know about that, man. The only denial of its addictive potential was the manufacturers greasing the skids with the lobbyists, telling the fucking pill manufacturers, telling the doctors, that it's not as bad as you think, or most people won't get addicted. And I've seen where they hold doctors' feet to the fire if they lose scripts because people are simply giving up these orange bottles for medical marijuana. And doctors will be like, oh, you got to follow the pill bottle to the letter. If it says take 3 a day, then you got to take 3 a day. And that's just, they're running out of things to do. They're fighting as hard as they can on all levels of government, and for the most part, a lot of doctors, depending on where you live, most doctors are fucking in on this war, pills versus weed. That's what this shit is, man. In introductory remarks at the meeting, U.S. House and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, who is not a member of the commission, voiced concerns that cannabis use can lead to addiction of other drugs. Quote, it frequently starts with something as seemingly innocent as marijuana, he said. We think a lot of things are harmless, and they're not. Well, you know what I think isn't harmless? Fucking Ben Carson. Ben, go back to sleep, man. Nobody gives a fuck about you. you're I'm guessing you're doing terrible things at HUD, all right? And my friends from DC, MJ, were out there protesting your bullshit and just HUD's policies in general, you know, kicking people on medical marijuana out of the house. Let's sit in here for a second.
Probably remember that commercial.
Oh God,
back in the Reagan years when they said this is
why are you talking?
And it was an egg, and this is your brain on drugs. They put it in a frying pan and watch it be destroyed.
Yeah, that's how stupid your fucking ad campaigns were. You remember that? You stupid fucker.
It's not too far from reality.
Yeah, it is.
And you know, it frequently starts with something as seemingly innocent as marijuana. And I think we're going to probably hear a little bit more about that from a real brain marijuana expert. But
you don't have a marijuana
we
expert.
Think a lot of things definitely have the ability.
Heard a call to action for each of us, and recognizing the nation, it just strikes
disgusting people
and represented and heard the president's words. I've said to folks over and over again across the country that I've spoken to the president about this dozens and dozens of times, and I know his heart, and I know how much he cares about this. And I think last week everybody who watched that speech got to understand exactly what I meant. And so thank you for making that happen. And we always thank the president for his willingness to do it. We're lucky to have the Surgeon General with us today.
Oh, for fuck's sakes. All right. That's about all I got on this. All right. I mean, this opioid commission ain't going to do a fucking thing, except for more people are going to die this year than last year, and that's going to keep on happening. That's the pace we're at right now. All right? That's where things are going right now. You heard the real statistics before. If you watch my channel or if you pay attention at all to marijuana news, you've heard that in medical marijuana states, the use of opioids has gone down dramatically. And they know this at this opioid commission. They fucking know it. They had all the data right in front of them. And they've probably seen it before it was forced in front of them. But now that they've denied it, we know exactly what they're doing. You know, and like I said, they would love to make some kind of pill that they could say, oh, this is a vaccination for addiction. So another bang up job from the Christie Opioid fucking commission.